I recently watched a documentary about Werner Heisenberg, and I think Heisenberg is a very, very interesting person. And before I go there, I just want to caveat, I know he's controversial for his involvement with the Nazi bomb, and I don't want to go into that discussion. I think as a scientist, as a person, he's very interesting. And the one thing that this documentary talks about is sort of his discovery of the concept of the observer, which he and Niels Bohr probably in conjunction um, discovered. And why is this so important? I think this is, in my view, the beginning of a philosophical movement that I would call it's in the eye of the beholder. So the departure from objectivity when observing nature. There is such a thing as objective truth, but no matter what, observations are theory laden. And it also culminates in the concept that we explain the unseen, the seen with the unseen, which are quotes from David Deutsch. So I want to talk about this concept and then tie it to the financial markets because this is extremely relevant for the financial markets in light of the efficient market theory. The purpose of this podcast is to give people a sense for what it feels like to run a hedge fund. So we have a lot of epistemology here. We talk a lot about philosophy and epistemology. The reason is partly because we like it. We are enamored with this type of thinking, but it's also incredibly relevant because the thinking about thinking, the thinking about theories, the thinking about how to even think about stuff is really at the core of the hedge fund business. The hedge fund business is a knowledge business. So it's a business about thinking. It's a business that is, you're not producing stuff, you're not building factories, you're allocating capital to risk. And the allocation of capital to risk is an abstract form of an action, and therefore very similar to philosophy and the arts and those sort of things. That's why it's very related. We've said many times on this podcast that reading is not just a pastime of hedge fund managers, it is part of the business. It is the conditioning of the mind. So this conversation about Werner Heisenberg has been in our focus many times. When we started working on quantum theory, that's when we first encountered the theories and the ideas of Heisenberg. Of course, I was taught Heisenberg also back in high school, and a little bit of when I did the mathematics that led me to the risk management courses that I did at the Polytech in Zurich. I was also encountered sometimes with Heisenberg, but the deep study of Heisenberg's theory really started when we did the quantum work, which was about 4 years ago, and we're revisiting it for various reasons. One is interest, curiosity, but also it's very, very important to go back to thoughts and thinkings and theories that maybe you've had opinions about before, and now you might have changed your opinion or you just reiterate your opinion. This is Not Even Wrong podcast. It's December 12th, 2021. This is Krim Delco for the day. Excuse me, it's a Sunday. There's no update. So we are still up 29.3%. The market's up 23.3%. We're outperforming by roughly 6%. So it's a Sunday again, no updates. Our annual performance is the same like in the last update, which was on Friday, December 10th. So let's talk about Werner Heisenberg. What's so interesting about Heisenberg? I think there's 2 points I want to mention here. One is Heisenberg discovers, maybe discover is the wrong word, but I'm just going to use it now. So Heisenberg discovers the concept that observation of the world is part of the theory, that we are, as observers, defining what we're seeing. So observations are theory laden. The observation itself has an impact through the observer. This leads to the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. You can't measure two vectors that don't commute at the same time. So for example, velocity and position, they don't commute. So you can either have a precise understanding of the position and not so precise velocity, or the other way around. Now, I don't want to go into physics here, but what's really amazing here is, in my view, two things. Number one, so it depends what you measure. And depending on what you choose to measure, you can either measure this or that. So therefore, your result is already predetermined by what you're trying to observe. So therefore, the observer has an impact on what's there to be observed. So that's one thing. I think the other thing, which is even more important, is that even when you're measuring the thing that you're measuring and that you're able to precisely measure, you need to have a theory, a technology, an instrument to be able to measure it. And you grow as a scientist, as a species, as humanity, as scientific endeavors. They grow with the knowledge that they have. So this is very, very David Deutschian also, that any kind of resource is defined by the knowledge we have. Resources are knowledge. So this, to me, is sort of the key of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. It then goes to the observer defines what is and what isn't in physics, Niels Bohr, and then I think it culminates in the multiverse interpretation of quantum physics, which just says that, look, everything is happening. Einstein was right that God is not throwing dice. The problem is we only see part of the universes, and therefore it comes to us as some sort of probabilistic situation, when in fact it's not. It is determined because everything that's possible is happening, but we humans only have access to the tangible universe. For us is just the one that we live in, or at least we perceive, and there's other universes that we don't perceive. They are also happening in parallel. This is post-Heisenberg. So Heisenberg wasn't talking about this, but I think it all culminates into that type of theory. So why is this interesting to us? I think it has two important aspects that I want to mention. Number one is really when you think about reality and what's going on out there, I think you really need to be very humble and honest to yourself of what is it you're observing, what is it you're able to see, and how much interpretation of your observables are you putting in while you're observing. So this is very, very important. There is no such thing as an objective way to observe things. And I think we're straddling a very fine line between that concept and the fact of objectivity and objective knowledge. And we don't want to fall into the relativistic trap. So this is very, very dangerous. I've even spoken with Brett Hall about this. It was an email exchange, but still, we spoke about this because I understand that what I see depends on what I think. And you could then sort of slid into this concept of everything is relative anyway. I don't want to go there. There is such a thing as an objective reality, objective knowledge. There is such a thing as gravity. The apple's falling down from the tree. Yes, we have a theory about it. We perceive it that way. It might not be that way. Maybe we're some sort of Platonian caveman that see the world through the fire and the shadows and all that stuff. But there is a thing. We can approach that objective reality by doing science. At least that's the best way we know how to approach that objective reality, by doing what Karl Popper would say, error correction and all those things. So I am a strong believer in that, but I also don't get hung up on that. So if I don't have access to objective reality right now, as we speak, that doesn't deter me from keeping trying. And I have to be aware of my own limitations as an observer, as a human, of, okay, because I'm observing with my theories, with my knowledge, I'm also going to be biased in what I see. This is also consistent with one of the interesting, let's say, comments that I've heard many scientists say, which is that the science du jour also defines our theories du jour, in a sense that, let's say, in the 19th century, hydraulics was the big thing coming out of the theory of gases and Mach and all that stuff. And then we thought that everything, even psychology, is some sort of definition of hydraulics. Then we have quantum mechanics in the early 20th century coming out, and then we have this concept of what is actually truth, and we have huge questions in epistemology. should we continue on this path of the scientific revolution that started in the Enlightenment, or should we not? Because this is Nietzsche, this is also people like Thomas Mann, particularly in the German philosophical context, are starting to question, well, if we don't have full deterministic access to nature, then is this technology that we define as observer and empiricism and the scientific method, is this even the legitimate way to go forward? Then we have electronics coming out. Today we have, for example, we have machine learning, and we start seeing everything through the lens of machine learning, the brain, neuroscience. Everything has sort of machine learning aspect towards finding solutions, which is, okay, we gather data, we somehow process data, and we find statistical minima and optima and maxima, and that's kind of how we operate. And probably in 50 years we'll have something else, and then we'll think back and it will sound to us a little bit like the 19th century neuroscientists or whatever those people were called back then, who were thinking more in hydraulics. So what I'm trying to say is that our theories, our knowledge, our scientific evolution also defines what we see. And that is, I think, a key aspect to science. Now, what does that all mean for the hedge fund business? I mean, it means a lot of things. First and foremost, it's the same thing, of course, in the hedge fund business, which is our observations are theory-laden. I see a company different than somebody else. I've spoken about this before. The reason we have markets, the reason we have different price targets for Tesla and all that is because different people, different entities, different players in the market have different perception of the same thing because their observations are theory-laden. So this is one important thing. It might sound obvious, but not to me. When I started on Wall Street, I thought there's an objective way to analyze companies. And I thought that there's such a thing as being more right and more wrong and things like that. I don't think that's the case. I think everybody in their own way is right. So this is the Anna Karenina thing, that in a certain way, everybody who's right is right in their own little way. Everybody who's wrong is wrong in the same way. And why is everybody wrong in the same ways? Because they're wrong in the same ways that their own rightness might not match reality. In other words, they're observing things based on their own theories, and they could be wrong because their theories are wrong. But if you're right the same way because you happen to have the same theory and the theory that actually matches reality, or you happen to be looking at the same thing. For example, what do I mean with that? Let's say, why are we right on Tesla? Why are people like all these YouTubers right on Tesla? Well, it's because they focused on the right thing, which is exponential growth, the cost of iteration, the rapid speed of innovation. That's what they were focusing on. They weren't focusing on things like valuation, price earnings ratio, moat, all these old school value investing type metrics. They just weren't focusing on that. They looked at new things, and those new things happened to be the right things to look at. So in that sense, it's almost, I would say, it's not random, but it is a bit of a roulette in a sense. Okay, what am I even going to look at? What am I focusing on? I believe that we are in a period right now as hedge fund managers that what matters is exponential growth. If you can find metrics around exponential growth, predictive theories that can predict exponential growth, particularly in the physical space, because this is the new thing. We had exponential growth in the software space for a while. What we have now is exponential growth in the physical space and also in the life science space. Those are the two new areas where we have exponential growth. If you can find metrics, and we at Orange Capital Partners have defined a few things: cost of iteration, computation, which is just another way to explore iteration, or computation is just another word actually for iteration. And if you can incorporate computation into the concept of developing or iterating around physical goods or life science goods, that's when we have exponential growth in these areas that we haven't had before. That's where a massive value creation can happen. Why is that? Because iteration, we also spoken about this, is just another measure of time. The faster you iterate, the faster you progress, the more return you can achieve within the context of the time measure that we have, which is the 1 year, which is the Earth going around the sun, which is an arbitrary way to measure stuff, but it is the way we measure ourselves. It is the way we're being calibrated. So we're not going to discuss that further. It is just simply, if you can iterate faster than that 1 year period, you have a good chance to actually outperform the markets and be successful in the marketplace. So to summarize, we believe that the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, the Heisenberg concept of seeing things and determining theories based or observables based on theories, that this first ideas, this first thought that came out of Werner Heisenberg, in our view, is an incredibly, incredibly important discovery, an important measurement of not necessarily what we see, but also how we interpret what we see. This is the amazing thing. And I think it translates directly into financial markets. The reason people are right or wrong in financial markets, it's not because they're stupid or anything like that. It's just simply that their observables are based on theories that might not be the right theories. I mean, this is in general the way we see things. This is it. So people in the financial markets are they're the most sophisticated, smart people out there. There's no such thing as stupid people in the financial market. We think self-selection of players in the market is so strong that you don't even have the luxury of having mediocre B-type players in the financial markets. Those who make it are A players. The reason they fail, somebody like, let's say, Adam Jonas, the Mr. $10 that everybody makes fun of, he's not a demagogue. I think he's a genuinely hardworking, high-end professional, an A-plus guy. He just has the wrong metrics. He's slowly transitioning into the right. It's the wrong metrics. And let's say what we call retail investors, those types who, for some reason, were right on Tesla, people were right on Amazon. What were they looking at? They were looking at the right things. Maybe they got lucky. I don't care, but they looked at the right things and they got it right. So for us hedge fund managers, it's not just the interpretation of what we see. It is also thinking of how are we going to even interpret what before we even see stuff. Let's think about what is it we're looking for. At Orange Capital Partners, we are in the business of generating wealth by investing in fundamentally new concepts and engineering practices with large impact. What we're looking for is cost of iteration. This is the key metric. The lower the cost of iteration, the higher the rate of error correction, the better our chance for wealth creation. This is what Heisenberg taught us. Heisenberg taught us, hey, pay attention on what you're looking for, because that is not so obvious. What you're looking for is determining what you're seeing. You're seeing with your brain, not just with your eyes. Your eyes are just a tool to see certain things, but your brain, your knowledge actually defines what you're seeing. So be very, very clear about what you're thinking before you see, because your thoughts define what you see.